what is the psychological impact of this COVID-19 experience for real estate consumers, buyers, and sellers? Is it going to continue in the fashion that we see it now? Are people going to be placing offers contingent upon a visual inspection before actually seeing the property? This and so much more. We've got on industry-leading expert and blogger Robert Hahn with 7DS and Associates up next. So we've got a fantastic guest here with us today. I'm really excited. This gentleman is extremely well known throughout the industry, internationally, and very much so here nationally. I saw him as a guest, a keynote speaker at the HomeSmart International Growth Summit that we recently had in Vegas. And I said, you know what? I got to have this gentleman on our show. He's fantastic. He did a wonderful job and is really on the cutting edge of what's happening in the real estate market. So now more than ever, we need these types of people and types of professionals to give us information, you know, from a very, I would say, a macro standpoint, right? He's looking at it from 30,000 square feet. So, you know, his name is Robert Hahn, and he is the managing partner of 7DS Associates in Marketing. It's a marketing and technology and strategy consultancy focusing on the real estate industry. Now, Robert is a veteran of the online world since the pre-Netscape internet. Wow, it's a long time. And and he got into real estate, the real estate industry at Realogy, which is a large real estate company with many names under it, and overseeing the interactive marketing and technology for the commercial brand. So at 7DS, his focus is helping clients take an integrated, evidence-driven approach to real estate, combining strategy, marketing, operations, and technology. And again, he's a frequent speaker at industry events, and he also writes on Inman as one of the bloggers on Inman. He does a fantastic job. And Inman, if you don't know, is the leading online news source for real estate. So needless to say, I'm honored to have you on the show with us, Robert. Thanks very much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Amelia, for inviting me. This is a wonderful opportunity. And yeah, interesting.
It is. So, you know, we're in some interesting times, and there's a lot of questions out there that realtors are having, that people that even, I'm sure, even, you know, people who are running iBuyer companies or the consumer. Mm-hmm. And one point you said you wanted to hit and drive home with was the psychological and cultural change on housing. I mean, how is that? What can you dive into that? What are your thoughts on the psychological and cultural change on our housing market, Robert?
Right. So, I mean, this is something that I guess we're going to find out, right, as we come out of this whole lockdown situation. But I think the biggest lasting impact of all of this is, how are consumers going to think about housing, and how are consumers going to think about the process of, you know, buying or selling a house? So the most important one really is, I think about this all the time, and I wish, and it's awesome really that you have a radio show that goes out to consumers, right? Because yes. One of the top questions I've got is, say you want to sell your home, right? Yep. Going forward, how do you feel about potentially 50 strangers walking through your house? Right? That becomes like one of the biggest things. Yeah. Where I sit right now, my sense is, and again, I'm just drawing this from, you know, myself and some of my friends who are not in the real estate industry. You know, I try to speak to them and say, you know, what do you guys think about this? My sense right now is, because we've just spent so much time, you know, it's 6 weeks, you know, in some cases longer, being told that other people are bad for our health. Social distancing, wear masks, you know, wash hands constantly, you can't gather. I mean, the underlying message is that other people are bad for our health. If that's the case, then I do think that we're going to have a pretty significant psychological and cultural change throughout the country, where if I'm selling my home, I don't want that many people walking through it, which then changes, you know, think about like things like open houses. Think about the showing process, right? The way it used to be BC, you know, before COVID, versus what it will be, you know, afterwards, right? Yeah. So I think that's one of the biggest changes, but that has been implications. If we indeed get to a point where sellers start saying, you know what, we have all sorts of online tools. We've just spent 6 weeks, using online tools for everything from, business to, working remotely to, cocktail parties with friends. You can view my home virtually until you are a very serious shopper, right?
Yeah.
And we're already starting to see that in some markets. Like, I'm based in Las Vegas, and when I spoke to some, top agents in the Las Vegas market, and what they talk about is they went to things where you would have a conditional offer, right? So someone would write an offer, but that's contingent upon I get to view the home physically in the next 3 days.
Sure. Yeah, we're doing
stuff like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we see that kind of change, then, really everything that we've known about real estate kind of changes fundamentally. And one of the fallouts from that, from my standpoint, is it makes vacant homes much more valuable than they are today. Does that make sense? Right?
Well,
so from from sellers and buyers standpoint, vacant homes are awesome. A home where family's still living there, less desirable just from a process standpoint, which then says to me, and I wrote a post on this recently. And by the way, most of my writing is done on my blog, which is the Notorious Rob, because I'm a fan of Biggie Smalls, being from New York and all. I actually think what this means is when we come out of this, the entire iBuying phenomenon is going to accelerate by a couple of years. And I think it's something that we're going to see, maybe not in your area, because I think you're in Rhode Island, right?
Yeah. Yep, we are in Rhode Island.
Yeah, I don't see it really happening in sort of the New England states for a variety of reasons, but I do think it's going to really take off in the rest of the country.
And what was that thing? What did you say? iBuyers? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, iBuyers, market makers, that whole model, because the idea is let's actually have a vacant home, right?
Yeah.
In between the period when someone owns that home and, someone buys that home. Mm-hmm. I actually think it places an enormous value on having a vacant property if psychological and cultural changes are enough, where people say, you know what, I'd much rather, not have to walk through a house where somebody's living and I don't know what their, health conditions are. I don't know what their hygienic conditions are. Yeah. As well as from a seller, I don't know who's coming to my house. I'd rather avoid all that. I do think that becomes one of the biggest changes that comes out of this.
So, so what is the thought is it takes about 66 days to get into a new habit, right? So,
right.
And that's, I Googled this, right? So according to this website, I think it's James Clear, right? It said 66 days is the first thing that pops up on Google. Now, I don't disagree with you that I think people are going to have this kind of new phobia. I hate to call it that, right? I hope it doesn't last. I really don't. And I don't disagree with what you're saying, Robert, but I kind of have another take on it. And I'd like to share it. I'd love to hear your thought on this, right? So my take is that, yes, we might be in this temporarily, and it might be, say, 66 days or so. And I do believe that there's a certain part of the market that is going to, just stay with this type of style. And they may convert to doing the iBuyers, which, by the way, for our listeners, iBuyers are a company that will basically virtually purchase your home. There are fees associated. As of right now, it costs a little bit more to have them help you, versus a realtor. Some may argue that. We can go into details either later on if we have time here or on another show, or you can read Robert's blogs, which, by the way, he says iBuyers are going to own 60% of the market share. I would like to think that's not true, but it may be. But anyways, by 2024. But anyways, where I'm getting at this is that there's a huge market segment right now, Robert, the millennials, and you're talking about placing conditional offers, and that is one segment that is not comfortable as first time and even second time buyers. I have not seen them comfortable placing condition offers until they actually physically see that property. And I know that's one segment of the market that really wants their hand held and really wants that type of service and guidance through it. And I do believe that the next generation, was that Generation Z, Gen Z?
Yeah.
Gen Z, while they're super tech savvy, I think they need more hands-on mentoring than even the millennials do. So I'm curious at what your take is on those those two generations and what you see coming from those two generations in the coming future from this.
Sure. And it's what the question you ask is actually really, really complicated, right? For a lot of reasons. But I'm going to try and let's really deal with kind of your core question. I agree with you 100% that the millennials and Zoomers, Gen Z or whatever they're called now, tend to want more guidance and more handholding.
Yep.
But the issue here is stuff like iBuyer, stuff like view type of models. And by the way, there's a different iBuyer model that we should talk about, which is more the knock and fly homes model.
Okay.
Those don't imply that you don't have a professional realtor helping you. It just means that you could have a professional realtor helping you and then still do the transaction, but with this middle step that doesn't really exist in most of the country right now. Yeah. So for example, with the traditional classic iBuyer market maker model, which is where the company buys your current home and you're the seller, you could actually have a realtor helping you navigate that, evaluate the offer, so on, because you're certainly going to want to have a realtor help you buy your next home, right? On the other side, you have the knock and fly homes model of iBuyer, where it's, I own the home, I list with you, right? You're my realtor, yeah, and then you buy the next home for me. So we go shopping for my new house because you got to live somewhere, right? I'm not going to just sell my house and, live on the street. So you're going to buy my next house, and now the house that I own is vacant, and you're going to sell that house for me. Do you see what I'm saying? So this, again, for your listeners, I think it would be worth going and researching companies like Knock, like Fly Homes. There are these types of models, which, if you think about it, they're not really the Zillow open door iBuyer model. What they are is a little bit more like a bridge loan, effectively.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to see is, the value of vacant homes rise because psychological cultural changes. It doesn't mean that realtor and really competent real estate professionals' advice or help is any less necessary. It's just necessary in a slightly different way. Mm-hmm. That's the first point. Second point, as far as the millennials and Zoomers are concerned, you're right. I mean, maybe they're saying, I'm not writing any conditional offers, etc. On the flip side of it, we also know that those younger folks are far more comfortable with, I guess we'll call it sort of the virtual life, mm-hmm. right? So if things like, really good 3D tours are available, if things like, especially when you're working with a top team, and they say, listen, we can do a FaceTime walkthrough of this property because seller knows, like, I've already been in the seller's home, seller trusts me, I will go do that walkthrough, and then, we can sort of look at every closet, that way. Yeah. For you to decide that house is good enough, I do want to see it in person. I could see something like that happening. I could see the millennials and Zoomers saying, okay, I could sit in my living room and view 30 homes, right? And then pick the 3 that I really want to see in person. Yeah. And if I have to write this conditional offer, fine, because I'm not writing it. My realtor's writing it for me. I could see that happening. And then the final piece is, I've been super interested in millennials for the longest time, and I think I have to start getting interested in Gen Z. Yes. One of the things I would point out there is it's not clear to me how many of them are actually going to buy houses going forward. Simply because we're entering this unprecedented time of recession, just right? Yeah. And we're speaking, in the middle of one of the, black swan events. We just don't know. Now, hopefully we come out of this very quickly, right? And hopefully we do have a rebound. We sort of recapture a lot of what was lost during this lockdown period. But already we know with 6 weeks into this, that, there are going to be a lot of small businesses, a lot of restaurants that close. We know there's going to be some economic pain associated with it. Oh, yeah. And we just don't know what the future holds for somebody who's 22, 20, graduating college this year. We just don't know what the employment prospects are going to be like for them. So we'll see. I mean, that's why I'm saying it's such a complicated question. But in terms of the real estate industry, in terms of housing, you got to live somewhere. I do think there's going to be some real interesting changes, especially when we're talking about millennials, yeah. Especially when we're talking about millennials in white collar jobs who have money, who have the financial capability to buy houses. And I'll kind of lead into it. one of the things I'm sort of projecting is that I think we could see exurban and country properties become extremely attractive, particularly to millennial first-time home buyers.
Okay. So basically, past the suburbs, you're looking, at
That's
a
right.
longer commute. So a little bit of a longer commute.
That's right. Right. My premise there is very simple. I mean, so let's say I'm a 30-year-old lawyer, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm younger, I'm a millennial, but I've got money, I can afford to buy a home. But before COVID, I had to, drive into Providence, to go to my job. Through this period, what we're seeing, and there's a lot of sort of business articles that are coming out talking about, it turns out remote work is pretty productive. Maybe it's not 100%, but it might be 90%. And a lot of the companies are looking at the money they're spending on office rent and questioning it. So if we get to a point where, listen, I'm going to telecommute, I'm going to work remotely over Zoom and phone and email and everything else, 4 days of the week, and I'll come into the office one day a week, or I'll just come into the office for big meetings that I have to have in person.
Yes.
Well, if that's the case, I'm not commuting anymore, and I could potentially live an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where my job is.
Wow.
At that point, if I'm 30, right, and I'm looking at, and again, I have some money, right, and I'm looking at a home that maybe that's $1.5 million, for, what I mean, like for a really smaller starter home type of deal, or I could move 2 hours away past the ring of suburbs, and now I'm getting a 5-acre spread for $350,000. Like, I think we're going to see that sort of thing, which, we really haven't talked about a whole lot. And especially for first-time home buyers, I think that becomes really attractive. And I do see some of those guys saying, hey, I can work remotely. This COVID experience has taught us all, how to do that. I'm going to move 2 hours away.
Wow.
I could really see that happening.
That's absolutely intriguing. I've never, Robert, I haven't heard anybody else bring that up, but it makes a ton of sense. And it almost makes me want to go on those land auction sites and start buying up tracts of land, right? Like, wow, that's
something to think about for you guys, like, because you're, one of the top teams in the entire state. Maybe you start building some relationships with people up in, I don't know, up in New Hampshire. Maybe start forming some networks with folks who are kind of in those more rural exurban counties, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who knows?
Absolutely, man. So that is totally intriguing. Let me ask you something, because we are actually past our time, but we're gonna go ahead and just this run on our podcast. It won't all hit radio. Yeah. But Rob, let me ask you: is there any current market right now where this is happening? Is there an example of where this is happening? Is it, is it like out in like Milwaukee area, or is it out like, where do you see this? Have you seen this successfully happening?
So obviously I haven't seen it happen at any scale, right? If you think about it, because this COVID thing is brand new. What I have seen though, and I've heard from some of my friends and colleagues who are more exurban, is I've heard it happening in Pennsylvania and New Jersey.
Oh, really?
Okay. So because apparently, there are, if you're, say, an hour and a half, if you drive an hour and a half outside of Philadelphia, right? Yep. You get into some really exurban areas, right? Like Delaware Water Gap area. And I've heard from people that some of the younger folks are moving out there because they have the types of jobs that they can do remotely. They might be graphic designers, computer programmers, things of that nature, right? So they can afford to buy, but they can't afford to buy in Center City, Philadelphia, or, in like the immediate ring of suburbs right around it, because it's just out of their price range.
Yeah.
Whereas if they moved into a little bit more exurban and rural areas, then they can afford to buy. So I've heard, again, it's much more sporadic. I have heard from brokers and agents that they are seeing, these sort of younger first-time home buyers coming out to them from the city because they have the types of jobs they can do remotely.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting is that trend gets supercharged, right? As the millennials and the Gen Z and maybe even others, maybe even Gen Xers like me, look at it and go, well, I can work remotely. why don't I trade in this 1,100 square foot, tiny little house and 1/10 of an acre, for $500,000, and why don't I go buy a 5-acre farmstead? You know what I mean? Like, I could really see that happening, depending quite frankly on what happens to the way we work. And I think one of the things that we are going to see a fundamental change on is way we work.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're seeing it as a realtor. I mean, could you have ever imagined you do so much remotely and virtually? You know what I mean?
Actually, I didn't think we would see it this quick, but it's basically what I had imagined the industry turning into a few years down the road. Like you said, with virtual walkthroughs. Like, I'm doing listing appointments right now, Robert, where people are taking their phone and walking me through their home, and I'm typing notes, taking screenshots, and I'm telling them I'm doing this, and then I can prepare fair market value analysis for them, and it's just unbelievable. Like, so we may not even have to step foot in a home to sell it in the near future. Right now, we're already actually doing it. So I think it's been absolutely fascinating. Definitely. And I think it's only going to improve. I really do. I think it's only going to improve the consumer experience. And I agree with you. I think there's a lot of disruptors that are going to be coming in and offering the consumers more options. And I would love to have you back on the show again to talk about iBuyers and your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Really.
Be happy to. I mean, so here's the thing, though. It's something I would, sort of tell the audience, because I know the audience is a mix of professionals and consumers.
Yes.
I mean, I really think we have to stop thinking of things in terms of disruptors or somehow anti. Look, the real trend that's going to happen, the real trend that's going to really accelerate because of COVID is the rise and dominance of agent teams like you guys.
Yeah.
And this is a piece that people don't quite like. When we talk about all these disruptors, whether we're talking about iBuyers like Zillow or, other types of quote disruptors, like, none of those disruptors have said anything like, we want to get rid of real estate agents. What they want to do is work with top-notch team leaders. What they want to work with are top-notch agent team institutions who are organized and can provide that level of consumer service. So the real problem in the industry going forward is, let's say we have the top 20% of real estate agents and brokers who are really well organized, really well operated. Like you had mentioned, they are already set up to do things like virtual listing appointments. You have staff, you've got the technology, you've got all of these resources. What happens to the other 80%? That becomes a real question, right? So if I'm a consumer and I could say, okay, I know 11 real estate agents, but only one of them is really a top-notch team. After we come out of this whole thing, do I still go, well, my cousin is a realtor, so I'm going to use him, even though he doesn't have 3D cameras, he doesn't have staff, he doesn't have anything. I mean, I don't know what happens with that. So I think what I would encourage people to think about as we, sort of look forward, say 6 months, a year, is the real disruptors are not the Zillows and Open Doors and these guys. They have like fraction of market share. Mm-hmm. The real disruptors are top-notch agent teams. Okay. Yeah. That to me is the thing that a lot of folks in the industry are simply missing. And we'll see if the consumer sort of picks up on that as we come out of this. Because I think there's going to be a huge difference in consumer experience, whether I'm working with a top team, top pro, or I'm working with somebody who does 3 deals a year. Yeah,
I don't disagree. And the fact of the matter is, we've got proof. We track the MLS, Robert, and all across the country do. And, like our team here in Rhode Island, we're selling homes with 3 times fewer days on market between 3 to 5% higher sales prices. So there's a big in all of that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And those things are all just going to amplify and get even more when we come out of this is sort of my take on things. We're not going to go back to the days when, you just hire your cousin, he sticks a yard sign and then he sells it. Like, it's just not going to happen. I don't see it happening. I think, consumers, whether they're buyers or sellers, are going to need a hell of a lot more support. They're going to need, the types of things that you and your team can bring. And so we'll see what happens to the other 80%.
Absolutely. If anything, I want to leave our podcast listeners and whatnot. I want to leave everybody with this thought, right? Right now, real estate, like the wild, wild west, man. There is Tremendous amount of opportunity. I got to tell you, once this COVID thing hit, and by the way, of course it's
Yeah,
sad, you know,
of course.
but I can tell you, Americans more than anyone else take times like this and make opportunity out of it. There's always the people that make opportunity out of bad things, right?
Hmm.
I mean that, I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it, you know what I mean, right?
I
So
know. Yeah, yeah. Opportunity and crisis. It's always the story.
so I'm connected in the Tom Ferry network and whatnot, and that's a big time real estate coach here, and there's a big network of agents, top agents all around the country, and I've noticed something with my team and with other leading teams and whatnot is we have all ramped up our marketing. We've realized
Hmm.
that so many of the large real estate companies, like even like Zillow and all these other big players who dumped billions and billions of dollars in pay-per-clicks and Facebook ads and all of that stuff, have scaled back for the time being. They've laid people off. So this is an
Hmm.
opportunity right now to really focus on being that in the spotlight if you are a local team. And the teams that have done very, very well. I mean, our business is exponentially higher than it was last year, and that's going to continue to grow because of all of the opportunity out there. So I really want to leave our
Yeah.
guests with that. Okay, and regardless
All
of
right.
what industry they're in, I think that there's some huge growth potential here for everybody. I really do. So, Robert, really appreciate you being on here. And again, if you guys want to check him out, check out Google the Notorious Rob. Google his blog. Robert Hahn, managing partner of 70S Associates. Any closing remarks, Robert?
No, I think I just want to echo what you said. Thanks for having me on. And I think the thing to keep in mind for everyone is within every crisis, there's opportunity, and it will be the folks who adapt the fastest and can be the most creative and innovative that's going to win out of this.
You beautifully sum that up within about 2 sentences, what took me 2 paragraphs. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome.